June 6, 1944. A grey dawn breaks over the English Channel and reveals a sight no human being has ever seen before. An armada, nearly 7,000 vessels of every kind, battleships and cruisers, destroyers and landing craft, cargo ships, tugs and tank-laden barges, all moving in one direction. On board, about 130,000 men are crossing the narrow stretch of sea, covered overhead by roughly 20,000 Allied aircraft. At dawn, after a night of bombs and flares, these men will land on the coast of France. Another 20,000 will arrive by air, paratroopers and glider troops dropping into the darkness inland. By midnight, about 10,500 Allied soldiers will be dead or wounded, and almost as many Germans. 11 weeks later, Paris will be liberated. The road to Berlin will be open. Today we're telling that story, from its political decision at Tehran and its planning in Britain, through the clash on the beaches themselves, to the breakout from Normandy and the road to Paris, through the eyes of generals and field marshals, but also through the lenses of the anonymous cameramen who risked their lives to film it. Because contrary to legend, this was not a clean, unstoppable victory march. It was barely contained chaos. December 1st, 1943. Tehran. 3 men meet in a walled garden to decide the fate of the world. Joseph Stalin, grim but satisfied, leader of the Soviet Union. Winston Churchill, worried, cane in hand, Prime Minister of Britain. Franklin D. Roosevelt, frail but determined, President of the United States. For 2 years, they've argued about one question: when will the Western Allies open a second front in Europe? Stalin has been demanding it since 1941. His armies have carried the full weight of the war in the East. Moscow, Stalingrad, Kursk, millions dead. He wants German divisions dragged away from the Eastern Front. Churchill is afraid. He remembers the slaughter of the First World War. He has pushed for indirect routes, North Africa, then Italy, hoping to attack Germany through its soft underbelly. But the Italian campaign has bogged down near Naples. The Allies are stuck on the Gustav Line. The route to Germany through the south is blocked. Roosevelt has hesitated. He wasn't sure, in 1942 or 1943, that the United States was ready for a cross-channel invasion. By late 1943, that changes. He wants to end the Third Reich as soon as possible, and to do it by striking in the West before the Red Army reaches too far into Europe. At Tehran, the 3 men finally agree. There will be a landing in northern France in the spring of 1944, the code name Operation Overlord. On the other side of the continent, Adolf Hitler has been expecting this. Since 1941, he has feared an Allied invasion of the West. In 1942, he orders the construction of a colossal defensive line, the Atlantic Wall. Nearly 4,000 miles of coastline from northern Norway all the way to the Spanish border. It is more propaganda than continuous concrete, but the strong points are real, especially along the French coast. Most German strategists are convinced the Allies will choose the shortest route. The Pas de Calais, only 25 miles from Dover. Thousands of conscripted French workers, prisoners of war, forced laborers, and deported Jews are ordered to pour millions of tons of concrete into bunkers, gun positions, and obstacles. By the end of 1943, Fortress Europe looks, on paper, secure. January 15, 1944. General Dwight D. Eisenhower arrives in London as Supreme Commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force. He must plan and launch Overlord. He appoints a British deputy for ground operations, General Bernard Montgomery, Monty, hero of El Alamein, adored by the British public. Together, they make a crucial decision. The landing will be in France, but not in the obvious place. Not in Calais, but on the more distant beaches of Normandy. From Ouistreham on the east to Saint-Martin-de-Varaville on the western side of the Cotentin. Normandy is farther from Britain, but less heavily fortified and within reach of the deep-water port of Cherbourg, which the Allies will need to seize quickly. Montgomery insists on widening the front, east to Caen, west toward Carentan and the approaches to Cherbourg, to avoid being trapped in a narrow strip of sand. Secrecy is everything. If the Germans know where the blow is coming, Overlord may fail before it begins. In early 1944, Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, the famed Desert Fox, arrives in France. Hitler has given him responsibility for inspecting and strengthening the coastal defenses. Rommel surveys the beaches and is appalled. The defenses are strong around major ports, weak in between. He believes Allied air power will make it impossible to move armored reserves quickly once the invasion starts. Rommel's answer: we must stop them on the beach. He wants to pull tanks and anti-tank guns close to the coast, pack the beaches with mines and obstacles, and smash the Allies at the waterline before they can build up supplies. His superior, Field Marshal von Rundstedt, disagrees. He wants the armored divisions kept inland to counterattack once the main landing area is identified. Hitler cannot decide. He splits the difference and ends up pleasing neither man. A few panzer divisions are moved closer to the coast. Most stay inland under direct German high command control. Rommel focuses on obstacles, underwater stakes with mines, steel hedgehogs made from old railway tracks, concrete dragon's teeth for tanks, flooded fields inland to drown paratroopers. But the Atlantic Wall is too long and time is too short. He can only harden parts of it. Rommel's efforts don't worry Eisenhower as much as they might, because for months, British and American engineers have been building something extraordinary. Since they cannot rely on capturing a major port immediately, they will bring their own artificial harbors, the Mulberries. Huge concrete caissons, called phoenixes, are built in British ports. They will be towed across the Channel, sunk off the Norman coast to form breakwaters, with floating piers and steel roadways to allow trucks and tanks to drive straight off ships onto the beaches, regardless of the tide. It is essentially a prefabricated harbor system. At the same time, Allied intelligence and deception staffs are hard at work. Operation Fortitude and related schemes feed the Germans a river of lies. Fake radio traffic from a fictitious 1st U.S. Army group in Kent. Dummy airfields lined with inflatable aircraft, wooden tanks and landing craft. Even a decoy army, supposedly commanded by George Patton, all pointed directly at Calais. Aerial photos and French resistance reports have given the Allies a detailed picture of the real defenses in Normandy. But the Germans see what they expect to see, a build-up opposite Calais. By May, Allied camps are overflowing with men and vehicles, isolated from local civilians to keep the secret. By all logic, the Germans know an invasion is coming. They just think they know where. They don't. In the spring of 1944, over 800,000 American servicemen are already in Britain. More arrive every week. Sherman tanks rumble through English villages. P-38ES and P-51ES crowd airfields once home to Spitfires. Yankee rations, rich in meat, sugar, and coffee, make British rations look miserable. Friendships, tensions, and romances grow. There have never been so many divorces and illegitimate births in British history as during these years. Beneath the jive and donuts, a storm is building. Eisenhower and his planners choose their invasion window carefully. A full moon at night for airborne drops. A rising tide at dawn to expose obstacles but not strand landing craft. In June 1944, only the 5th, 6th, or 7th fit. Ike initially selects June 5th. Then the weather turns. On June 4th, as some ships are already at sea, a violent Channel storm erupts. Eisenhower recalls the fleet. Operation Overlord is suddenly in danger. The Germans may have spotted unusual movements. The next acceptable tide and moon combination is 2 weeks away. 2 weeks of delay, men stuck on ships, seasick and anxious, morale dropping, surprise fading. At his headquarters, Eisenhower listens to the meteorologists. Most of the news is bad. Then, on the evening of June 4th, a small break is predicted. A brief improvement on June 6th. Not perfect, but better than anything in the next fortnight. In about 30 minutes, Eisenhower makes his decision. Okay, we'll go. June 6, 1944 is set. On the night of June 5th to 6th, the great machine begins to move. Allied bombers and fighters pound railways, bridges and roads across northern and western France to slow German reinforcements. Dozens of small ships steam up the channel north of Le Havre, generating smoke and fake radio traffic to suggest a large force heading for Calais. At Greenham Common Airfield, Eisenhower visits the men of the U.S. 101st Airborne Division. They will be among the first to touch French soil. Ike smiles, jokes, slaps shoulders for the cameras, but his jaw is tight. The paratroopers grin and put on brave faces. Everyone knows the truth. Many of these men will not come back. Elsewhere, pathfinders paint their faces black, or with Native American war paint, a mix of real heritage and Hollywood myth to summon courage. Their mission: jump into Normandy in the dark, mark drop zones for gliders, seize bridges and crossroads, and sow confusion behind enemy lines. That night, Eisenhower writes a brief note, to be used only if everything goes wrong. My decision to attack at this time and place was based upon the best information available. If any blame or fault attaches to the attempt, it is mine alone. He slips it into his pocket, just in case. In the early hours of June 6th, from about 3:15 a.m., Allied aircraft bombard German positions behind all 5 chosen landing beaches: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, Sword. At dawn, naval guns open fire from battleships and cruisers lying up to 20 miles offshore. The plan is simple in outline: paratroopers and commandos inland to block counterattacks, bombers and naval artillery to crush beach defenses, infantry to storm the beaches and push inland, followed by tanks and mechanized units. Reality is messier. Many bomb runs, trying to avoid hitting incoming landing craft, release their loads too late, dropping bombs behind the German positions rather than on them. Naval gunfire, constrained by timing and visibility, cannot fully destroy the Atlantic Wall. The heaviest test of this failure falls on one place: Omaha Beach. Omaha lies between rocky headlands, backed by bluffs studded with bunkers and machine gun nests. the U.S.1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One, and the 29th Division's 116th Regiment, many of them very green, are assigned to this sector. To avoid coastal guns, landing craft are released too far out, onto a choppy, tide-flooded sea. Men are packed in like cattle. Photographer Robert Capa, the only still photographer on the first waves, writes, "When the noise of the first shell hit our ears, we hit the deck and lay in our vomit without watching the coast approach. When ramps go down, the men step into hell. German defenses at Omaha are almost intact. The first waves are cut to pieces. Machine guns rake the surf. Mortars fall among groups of men trapped behind beach obstacles. Strong currents push landing craft off course. Many men drown when heavy gear drags them under. The rising tide reduces the width of the beach, forcing survivors into an ever smaller killing zone. Radio messages go back to the fleet, pinned down by enemy fire, nailed to the spot. HQ staff half a continent away will later label photos from this sector with a new name: Bloody Omaha. By mid-morning, some American commanders consider withdrawing, abandoning the men already ashore and shifting effort to other beaches. But that would mean sacrificing thousands already on the sand, leaving a gaping hole in the Allied front, risking the entire operation. On the bluffs, small groups of U.S. infantry begin to claw their way up gullies and blast paths through barbed wire and mines. Individual initiative, brutal courage, and sheer luck slowly break the German firing line. By late afternoon, beach exits are finally forced open. At an unimaginable cost, around 3,000 American casualties, Omaha is no longer in German hands. The beachhead is tenuous, but it exists. Not every beach is Omaha. Farther west at Utah Beach, the U.S. 4th Infantry Division lands off target, but into a relatively lightly defended area. A battalion commander famously says, "We'll start the war from right here." Casualties are relatively light, and the beachhead expands steadily inland toward the vital port of Cherbourg. In the British sector, Sword Beach, near Ouistreham, is assaulted by the British 3rd Infantry Division and commandos, including French troops of Kiefer's Commando. Gold Beach sees British forces push toward Bayeux. Canadian troops land on Juno Beach. The sea is rough, defenses are strong. The first waves take heavy losses, about 300 Canadians killed that day. But they break through, press inland toward the Caen airfield, and liberate the first French villages. For many Canadians, it's their first time in the land their grandparents left. They are welcomed as both foreigners and family. By evening, on 4 out of 5 beaches, the news is cautiously good. Only Omaha still hangs in the balance. Back in Portsmouth, Admiral Ramsay smiles. General Eisenhower does not. He has spent the day reading a mixture of grim and hopeful reports. He knows the landings are not won yet. They are simply not lost. In the days after D-Day, the priority is clear. Link the beaches. Hold against counterattacks. Bring in men, tanks, fuel, and ammunition as fast as possible. The Mulberry harbors off Arromanches for the British and off Omaha for the Americans begin to unload incredible volumes. Every day, up to 7,000 vehicles and 15,000 tons of supplies, plus thousands of men, flow onto the beaches. Then, on June 19th, the weather strikes again. A massive channel storm, the worst in 40 years, slams into Normandy. Within hours, the American Mulberry at Omaha is wrecked beyond repair. The British Mulberry at Arromanches is badly damaged but can be rebuilt. For 4 days, supply lines stagger, ships are driven ashore, floating docks snap, gangways twist and break. Overlord runs about 10 days behind schedule. The Americans must capture Cherbourg quickly to compensate. They do. On June 26th, US forces enter the battered port. About 36,000 Germans surrender. Cherbourg's facilities are wrecked, mined, and booby-trapped, but the harbor will soon be back in service. One more piece of the Atlantic Wall has been torn down. In the east, things go less smoothly. Montgomery had hoped to take Caen on D-Day. Instead, German panzer divisions, including the 12th SS Hitlerjugend, counterattack ferociously. Caen becomes a grinding urban and defensive battle. British and Canadian advances stall. To the west, American divisions push into the bocage, the hedge-lined fields of Normandy. Here, defense has every advantage. Thick earth banks and dense hedges create a maze of small fields. A handful of well-placed German defenders can stop an entire US battalion. Tanks are forced onto roads where they are ambushed. Attempts to break through degenerate into brutal close-range fighting. US soldiers start calling it "this goddamn country." To solve this, General Omar Bradley plans Operation Cobra. The idea: use massive concentrated bombing to smash a hole in the German front, then send US armored divisions streaming through into open country. On July 25th, after D-Day's beachheads have stabilized, Cobra begins. We have already seen what happens to Panzer Lehr Division under that onslaught. Bradley's forces finally burst out of the bocage. American tanks fitted with welded hedge cutters, nicknamed rhinos, punch through hedgerows like plows. By the end of July, US armored divisions have raced to Coutances, Avranches and Granville, the last Norman ports before Brittany. The breakout has begun. In early August, the French 2nd Armored Division under General Leclerc lands at Utah Beach. These Free French troops have fought in North Africa and Italy. Now they are home, under American command, ready to liberate their own soil. Hitler tries one last throw of the dice in Normandy. On August 7th, he orders a counterattack near Mortain, hoping to cut off Patton's armor and drive the Allies back to the sea. We already know how that ends. Rocket-firing Allied aircraft and devastating artillery and time-on-target missions shatter the attack. Field Marshal von Kluge writes that continuing is impossible. Soon afterward, he commits suicide. Bradley and Eisenhower see their chance. They allow the Germans to push forward, then close the jaws around them. Patton's forces swing north and east toward Argentan. British and Canadian forces push south around Falaise. Polish and Canadian units hold the vital exits. By late August, the Falaise pocket is sealed. Between 30,000 and 50,000 Germans are killed, wounded, or captured. The road to the Seine and the German border lies open. At the same time, Paris rises. On August 19th, smoke drifts over the city as the French resistance launches a full uprising. German units begin to withdraw east in long convoys, harassed by partisans and Allied air power. General de Gaulle, head of the Provisional French government, pushes Eisenhower hard. Paris must be entered, not bypassed, not just for military reasons, but to prevent communist elements in the resistance from seizing power alone. Eisenhower yields. Leclerc's 2nd Armored Division is given the honor of leading the way. On August 25, 1944, German forces in Paris surrender. De Gaulle marches down the Champs-Élysées to the roar of the crowd. France, humiliated in 1940, stands again among the victors. From the first paratrooper jump to the last German POW column leaving the plains of Falaise, the Battle of Normandy lasted almost 3 months, involved millions of men, cost hundreds of thousands of casualties, and destroyed the German army in the West. June 6, 1944, D-Day, is only one day in that campaign, but it is the turning point. The day when the greatest armada in history crossed the Channel, the Atlantic Wall cracked, and the liberation of Western Europe became not a dream, but an unstoppable process. It was not clean, it was not easy, it was not inevitable. It was chaos, fear, courage, and improvisation captured in the shaky footage of men like Desmond O'Neill and Ian Grant, and written in the blood of anonymous infantrymen who never lived to see Paris. Whoever they were in those crowded shots, the ones turning back toward the camera, the ones disappearing into grey smoke, we owe them something simple: to remember what they did on that grey morning when the greatest battle of all time began. If you want to follow the rest of this story, the breakout, the drive to the Rhine, and the final collapse of the Reich, subscribe to Last Stand History and hit the notification bell. Because history is not just dates and names, it's choices. And June 6, 1944 was one of the biggest choices humanity ever made.